Okay, let's just jump right into this one because the story we're about to unpack sounds, well, it sounds completely made up. We're talking about one woman in a single night performing 400 amputations. That's a number that would crush an entire modern hospital, let alone one person in the middle of a war zone. It sounds impossible, right? Well, let's get into it. And that is the question, isn't it? It's not just about what she did, it's how in the world was this even possible? Think about it. A 45-year-old widow from Illinois with zero, and I mean zero, formal medical training. How does she suddenly become the most effective surgeon on one of the Civil War's bloodiest battlefields? The answer is, well, it's complicated. And honestly, it's absolutely incredible. So let's meet the woman at the center of this storm. Her name was Mary Ann Bickerdike. Now, to the soldiers she saved, she was just Mother. But to pretty much everyone else, they knew her as the Cyclone in Calico. And what a name, right? It just perfectly captures her whole vibe. Unstoppable, a little chaotic, but totally life-saving. She wasn't just some caregiver. She was a literal force of nature. Now, to really get what she pulled off, you have to understand the scene. This was not a hospital. We're talking about a frozen hellscape. The setting is the aftermath of the Battle of Fort Donelson, February 1862. And yeah, it was a huge victory for the Union, but that victory came at a truly horrific cost. The scale of this crisis, I mean, it's just staggering. We're talking about roughly 2,700 Union casualties. And these aren't just numbers on a page. These were men, wounded, freezing to death, and dying with basically no medical support system to speak of. It's a number that's just, it's hard to even wrap your head around it. So you have thousands of wounded men. And to deal with them, how many surgeons do you think they had? Get this, 6. Just 6 surgeons. And to make matters worse, many of them were totally exhausted, completely overwhelmed, and, well, according to some reports, just plain drunk. The situation was an absolute disaster. There was no system, there was just suffering. I mean, the scene itself was a total nightmare. Forget about hospitals, there were no buildings, just these flimsy little tents pitched out in the snow. Wounds were getting infected almost the second they happened, and then there was gangrene, that truly horrifying infection that literally turns flesh black. It was spreading through the camp like wildfire. The only way to stop it was amputation, and the clock was ticking for hundreds and hundreds of men. This is the chaos that Mother Bickerdike walks straight into. So into this complete and utter chaos, she arrives, Mother Bickerdike. And she takes one look at this disaster and just decides, okay, I'm in charge now. What happened next was an absolute marathon of grit, gore, and pure unbelievable willpower that was going to last all night long. Just look at the timeline of this night. It shows you her absolutely unrelenting pace. She gets there and boom, she takes control. Within an hour, she's set up a kind of makeshift assembly line for amputations. Then, for the next 10 hours straight from 7 p.m. to 5 a.m., she just works, sawing through arms, through legs, with no break. She does this until she literally collapses from pure exhaustion. And then what? She gets back up, and she keeps going. Let's actually break that down, because the math is insane. To get through 400 amputations in that time frame, she was working at a mind-boggling rate. We're talking about 28 amputations every single hour. Can you even imagine the physical and mental toll of that pace? For hours and hours, in the dark, in the freezing cold. It's just, wow. And if you break it down even further, it just becomes almost unbelievable. We are talking about one amputation roughly every 2 minutes. Just think about that. 2 minutes. To look at the wound, to make the cut, to saw through the bone, and then move on to the very next soldier in line. It is brutal, brutal efficiency, born out of just absolute necessity. And that really gets to the heart of what was happening here. You know, this wasn't some clean, precise surgery you see on TV. This was battlefield medicine at its absolute rawest. As one source said, there was just no time for finesse. The goal was simple: save a life. That's it. It wasn't about saving a limb perfectly. So the big question is, how on earth did she do it? And maybe even more important, how did so many of her patients actually survive this ordeal? Well, she didn't have a medical degree, no, but what she did have was something way more valuable in that moment. Just good old common sense and an absolutely unbreakable will. She basically invented a whole new sanitation protocol, right there, on the fly. You have to remember, her protocol was so simple, but for the time it was revolutionary. This was before germ theory was really a thing, right? But Bickerdike just knew instinctively that filth equaled death. So what did she do? She started boiling surgical tools in coffee pots. She washed wounds with a mix of whiskey and water. She used these cornmeal poultices to help draw out infection. And, this is so crucial, she made sure all the bloody, contaminated straw bedding was burned, just to stop the disease from spreading. Oh, and let me tell you, she did not mess around. If she found a doctor who was too drunk or too incompetent to do his job, she fired him, right there, on the spot. Can you imagine? A civilian woman, a nurse, firing military surgeons? And when the anesthesia ran out, well, she went back to the grim classic of the era. She told the soldiers to literally bite a bullet. That's where the saying comes from, to deal with pain that I can't even begin to imagine. She was pragmatic, almost to the point of being ruthless. But then you have this quote from a soldier that just shows you the other side of her. It perfectly captures this dual nature she had. He said, "She'd amputate your leg, then cook you soup with the other hand." And that's it, right? She was tough enough to saw off your leg and not even flinch, but she was also mother, the person who would then turn right around and make sure you had soup and were being looked after. Part surgeon, part nurturer. And right here, this is the proof. This is where you see that her methods, as crazy as they might have seemed, actually worked. Just look at these numbers. The average survival rate for an amputation during the Civil War, a really grim 30%. But under Mother Bickerdike's care, even in those horrific conditions, it was around 60%. She literally doubled a soldier's chance of survival. That's not luck. That was the cyclone and calico effect. So what happens after a night like that? Well, as you can imagine, word gets around fast. Her actions didn't just save a bunch of lives, they turned her into an actual legend. And her reputation, her authority, it went all the way to the very top of the Union Army. And the stories about her are they're legendary. There's this one where an officer goes to complain to General Ulysses S. Grant himself about this civilian woman who's bossing everyone around. And Grant's response was just so simple, so perfect. He just said, "She outranks me. Let her do whatever she wants." He got it. He knew how valuable she was and basically gave her a blank check to get the job done. And look, if an endorsement from General Grant isn't enough for you, how about this one? This is from General William T. Sherman, a guy who was not known for being easily scared, right? Sherman once said that Mother Bickerdike was the only person he was actually afraid of. I mean, come on, that tells you everything you need to know about the kind of respect she commanded. And you know, her work didn't stop at Fort Donelson. That was just the beginning. Over the rest of the war, she set up and ran more than 300 field hospitals. She's credited with saving something like 10,000 lives. She kept on kicking out useless staff wherever she found them. And even after the war was over, she didn't stop. She became this fierce advocate, fighting to get pensions for the very same veterans she had saved on the battlefield. But you know, maybe her most powerful legacy comes down to this one simple phrase. It became a common saying among the regular Union soldiers. For those guys, it wasn't about generals or grand strategies. Survival boiled down to one simple belief. If Mother Bickerdike's there, you'll live. That's what she represented. She was hope. So, in the end, what do we make of Mary Ann Bickerdike? She wasn't just a nurse. She was a revolutionary in battlefield medicine. She was a logistical genius, and she was a leader who actually made generals nervous. And I think her story leaves us with a pretty unforgettable moral, don't you? Never, ever underestimate a middle-aged widow, especially when she's holding a bone saw.